In 1893, deep in the sun-scorched ruins of southern Iraq, a French archaeologist named Ernest de Sarzec was carefully cataloging thousands of clay fragments pulled from the ancient Sumerian city of Teo. Most of them were administrative records, grain receipts, temple inventories, the boring paperwork of a civilization 4,500 years dead. But one fragment, marked in his ledger as K2486, was different. It was darker than the others, heavier, and the symbols pressed into its surface did not describe taxes or harvests. They described something sleeping, something buried, something west of the Great River, beneath the red sands. And when the tablet was finally translated 14 years later by one of the greatest Assyriologists of the 20th century, the contents were so disturbing that within just 5 years, the artifact had quietly vanished from the official inventory of the Louvre. No public announcement, no explanation, just gone. What did that tablet say? What is buried beneath the Sahara Desert? And why, for the last 30 years, has every nation that touches that sand refused to dig? Before we go any further, do me one quick favor. If you want to keep getting the stories the history books leave out, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you do not miss what comes next. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think there is something buried under the Sahara? Or is this just an old story that got out of hand? I read every single one. Now stay with me, because what you are about to hear is one of the most carefully buried secrets in modern archaeology, and by the end of this video, you are going to understand why no government on Earth wants you to know about it. The man who translated tablet K2486 was Francois Thureau d'Angin, and in the world of ancient languages, his name carries the same weight that Einstein carries in physics. In 1907, he sat down with the fragment and produced a translation that even by today's standards is considered authoritative. The tablet itself dates to 2350 BCE, placing it squarely in the reign of Sargon the Great, the founder of the Akkadian Empire and arguably the first true emperor in human history. And what the tablet describes is not a myth. It is not a poem. It reads like a warning, a location report. The text speaks of a chamber, sealed by what the scribe calls 7 gates of bound copper, located 14 days' travel southwest of the Euphrates River. Now, 14 days by ancient caravan, moving at roughly 30 to 35 kilometers per day, lands you somewhere between 400 and 500 kilometers from the river's western bank. When you plot that distance on a modern map, you do not end up in the middle of nowhere. You end up at the eastern edge of the Libyan desert. You end up at the Gilf Kebir Plateau, a place that even in 2026, almost no human being is allowed to set foot on without military clearance. And here is where the story takes its first sharp turn into territory that historians do not like to discuss. In 1933, a Hungarian aviator and desert explorer named Laszlo Almasi led an expedition into that exact region. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Almasi was the real man behind the character Ralph Fiennes played in the film The English Patient. He was a brilliant cartographer, a meticulous note-taker, and during his expedition into the Gilf Kebir, he documented something strange. Black basalt formations rising from the sand that the local Bedouin guides refused to camp near. They called them the doors that HUM. Almasi's journals describe a low vibration in the stones, audible only at night, and his expedition photographer captured images of what appeared to be cuneiform-like markings carved into the rock. Almasi planned a follow-up expedition the next year to recover those stones. He returned to the site in 1934. And here is the part that nobody talks about. The stones were never recovered. The photographs from that second trip have never surfaced. And Almasi himself, for the rest of his life, refused to publicly discuss what happened on that return journey. He took it to his grave in 1951. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's interesting, but it's still just stories, translations of ancient texts, the journal of an eccentric explorer. Where is the hard evidence? Because if something is really buried under the Sahara, modern science should be able to see it, right? Well, in November of 1981, NASA flew a mission called Shuttle Imaging Radar A, SIRA for short. It was the first time in history that radar capable of penetrating solid ground was carried into orbit. And when they pointed that radar at the Sahara Desert, what they saw was so unexpected that it changed the entire field of remote sensing overnight. The radar punched through up to 16 feet of sand and revealed an enormous network of structures beneath the Salima sand sheet. Not natural formations, geometric, linear, arranged in patterns that do not occur in nature, and the area covered by these subsurface anomalies was staggering, more than 60,000 square miles. That's larger than the entire country of Greece, hidden right now beneath the sand of the border of Egypt, Sudan, and Libya. The official explanation at the time was that these were ancient river channels, and some of them probably are, but not all of them, not by a long shot. And the regions where the geometry gets strangest, the regions that look the least like natural water flow, are precisely the regions that, just 13 years later, would become completely off-limits to the entire scientific world. In 1994, something happened that almost no one outside of academic archaeology has ever heard of. 5 nations, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, Chad, and Algeria, sat down together and signed what was called the Cairo Antiquities Accord. On paper, it sounds like a routine agreement, a coordinated moratorium on deep core excavation across the central and eastern Sahara. But when you look at the actual area covered by the moratorium, the scale becomes impossible to ignore. 2.1 million square kilometers. That is an area larger than Western Europe, off limits to deep drilling by international agreement. And the stated reason for this unprecedented restriction? Preservation of undocumented strata. Think about that phrase for a moment. Preservation of strata that, by definition, no one has documented yet. How do you know something needs preserving if no one is allowed to look at it? Who told these 5 governments what was down there? And why did they all agree in the same year to lock the door and throw away the key? The questions only get harder from there. In 2007, the Boston University Center for Remote Sensing, led by the renowned Egyptian-American geologist Farouk El-Baz, identified something extraordinary in the Egyptian Western Desert, a circular subsurface structure 31 kilometers wide. To put that in perspective, that is roughly the size of the city of San Francisco, buried beneath the sand. El-Baz, being a careful scientist, initially proposed that the structure might be an impact crater from an ancient meteorite. It was a reasonable hypothesis, and he applied for permission to send a ground team to investigate. That permission was denied, not delayed, not modified, denied, by the Egyptian military, who cited what they called Zone 4 restrictions. To this day, no public document explains what Zone 4 is, who designated it, or what authority governs it. El-Baz, one of the most respected geologists alive, was simply told no. And the 31-kilometer structure has sat there, untouched ever since. Now, let's come back to the tablet, because the Sumerian text doesn't just describe a location. The scribe who wrote tablet K2486 included a very specific condition for the seal. The entity below, the text says, was placed there by the Anunnaki until the stars returned to their first position. Now that phrase has been studied by linguists and astronomers alike, and there is broad agreement on what it refers to: the precession of the equinoxes. The slow, 25,000-year wobble of the Earth's axis that causes the position of the stars to drift across the night sky. One full cycle takes approximately 25,772 years. If you calculate forward from the astronomical reference points that the ancient Sumerians used, the current cycle completes somewhere between the years 2160 and 2280 of our era. We are, in other words, currently inside the window. Whatever the tablet describes, whatever was sealed beneath the sand by people we barely understand, was sealed there with an expiration date, and that expiration date is now. In 2011, a joint French-Algerian geological survey set up operations at the Tassili Niger Plateau in southern Algeria. Their stated goal was routine: map the subsurface geology, look for water and mineral resources. They began drilling, and at a depth of 340 meters, the drill bit struck something unexpected. a metallic layer, not iron ore, not a natural mineral seam. According to the field notes that briefly circulated before being recalled, the layer was uniform, smooth, and showed no signs of geological formation. The project was suspended within 72 hours. The drilling rigs were removed. All core samples, every fragment, every photograph, every data file were transferred to a sealed facility in the Algerian town of Regain. If that name rings a bell, it should. Regain is where France conducted its first atomic bomb test in 1960. It is one of the most restricted pieces of land in North Africa, and whatever they pulled out of the sand at Tassili, Niger, is sitting there right now. No published results, no peer review, no scientific paper, nothing. Here is what makes all of this even stranger. The Sahara has not always been a desert. Between roughly 11,000 and 5,000 years ago, the entire region was green, lush, filled with lakes, rivers, grasslands, and abundant wildlife. We call it simply the Green Sahara. And during that period, human beings lived there. They built communities. They painted the walls of caves and rock shelters with images of their world. And at a site called Tadrat Akakas in modern-day Libya, those Neolithic paintings show something that has never been adequately explained. Tall figures, taller than the humans painted beside them, emerging from circular openings in the ground, coming up out of the earth. The paintings predate the Sumerian tablet by at least 3,000 years. The people who made them had no contact with Sumer. They could not have copied the story. And yet their imagery matches the tablet's description with uncomfortable precision. The Watchers who entered the earth. That is the exact phrase the Akkadian scribe used. And here are these prehistoric African artists, 3 millennia earlier, painting the same scene on a cave wall. Which brings us to the present day. As of 2024, the European Space Agency's Sentinel-1 satellite program has been continuously monitoring the surface of the Sahara, and the data is unambiguous. In more than 30 years, no nation has conducted any excavation deeper than 50 meters within the designated exclusion zones. Not one. And this is despite the fact that the Sahara sits on top of some of the largest untapped resources on the planet. The Nubian sandstone aquifer system holds an estimated 150,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water. The Libyan and Algerian deserts contain proven oil reserves worth trillions of dollars. The region has been geologically surveyed and found to hold rare earth elements that the modern economy desperately needs. And yet, nothing. No drilling, no mining, no excavation. Researchers like Robert Schoch of Boston University and the late Zechariah Sitchin, who spent his entire career studying the Sumerian texts, have asked the same question over and over again. What economic logic explains this? What political pressure could possibly keep 5 rival nations and the entire international scientific community in lockstep agreement for 3 decades? The honest answer is that no normal explanation works. Something is down there. Something that someone, somewhere, has decided the rest of us are not ready to see. The Sumerians knew. The cave painters of Tadrat Akakas knew. And whatever they knew, it scared them enough to carve it in stone and paint it on cave walls so that we, 4,000 years later, might still receive the warning. The stars are returning to their first position. The window is open, and the gates of bound copper, wherever they are no longer being guarded by people who know what lies behind them. They are being guarded by people who simply do not want anyone to find out.